I had a pretty awesome childhood. Like most kids growing up in the 90s, my TV schedule consisted mostly of SpongeBob SquarePants, Power Rangers, and Transformers. For the most part, I wasn't into really kiddie shows like Barney or Mr. Rogers or anything like that. But the other day, I was talking with my mum about when I was a little kid. And at one point during the conversation, she brought up the topic of an old TV show I sometimes watched. It was called Stub's Clubhouse. I was unaware of the show she was referring to at first, but then, out of nowhere, the memories just came flying back. I remembered it so clearly almost instantly. Basically, Stub's Clubhouse was a cheesy, low-budget kids show starring a clown named Stub. He had a rainbow-colored jacket, a hat, and, if my memory serves, he wore black trousers with stars on them. The show was a kind of rip-off of Pee-wee's Playhouse. Even as a young kid, I could tell that. Basically, Stub lived in a big clubhouse, which, strangely enough, looked just like a normal house. I assume that was due to their low budget. Stub had a group of friends who lived in the clubhouse. I don't remember much, but I vaguely remember a poodle and a man in a really badly made elephant costume. Like I said, I don't remember much about the show. I didn't watch it very much, mainly for two reasons. One, it aired at a very strange time. Late at night, around 10:30 p.m., which is bizarre for a kids show. And two, it only aired on a really obscure channel called Channel Bebo, which only aired shows for about 3 years, and then the channel was shut down for unknown reasons. The only other thing I remember about the show was the theme song was sung by a woman who sounded like she was half asleep while singing it, and the background music was played entirely on a xylophone. In November of 2006, I'd just turned 15. This was a few days after the conversation with my mum, and I decided to treat myself to a little trip to half-price books. See, I like half-price books more than Barnes & Nobles because you can find older books and movies as opposed to the up-to-date stuff at B&N. So, I was browsing through the videotapes, searching for a tape of one of my favorite shows, Street Sharks, a show about anthropomorphic sharks that fought crime. I was going through the tapes in alphabetical order, and I'd just reached the S section when something caught my eye. It was a tape labeled Stub's Clubhouse. The case had no logo or picture to indicate it was Stub. It was just a plain, bland case that had a piece of paper taped on the side with Stub's Clubhouse scribbled in black Sharpie. I was still kind of curious about this show that I barely remembered, and plus I couldn't find Street Sharks, so I decided to buy Stub. It was pretty cheap, even for a half-price books tape being only 75 cents. But hey, it was a bargain. I took it to the checkout counter. The woman working there looked up at the tape, and then she stared at me. She timidly asked, "Are you sure you want to buy this tape?" I politely said yes, and she rung it up. I went home and got out my VCR and hooked it up to the TV in the living room where my 6-year-old sister Emily was playing with Barbies. She asked me what I was doing, and I told her that I'd gotten a tape at half-price books that we could watch together. I put the tape in, and the standard copyright infringement warning message came up as usual. The tape started at the theme song of the first episode, complete with xylophone music and sleepy singer. The episode started out in the clubhouse where Stub introduced himself and told the viewers that we were going on a field trip. There was a very bad rough cut to a playground in the middle of a grassy park. There was a group of small children, about as old as my sister, playing on a merry-go-round. Stub walked up to them and they all ran to give him hugs. After that, Stub looked at the camera and asked if the kids at home would like to play too. My sister Emily piped up, "Yes." And Stub replied,
Alrighty-o. Then come on down to the playground and play with me.
And then Emily asked me if she could go to the playground with Stub. But she knew how videotapes worked, and I told her that this was filmed. But then I saw something interesting out of the corner of my eye. You see, we have a playground in our neighborhood, about a block from our house, but close enough that we can see it from our living room window. It took me a second to make the connection, but then it hit me. The playground in this video was the same playground in our neighborhood. It must have been filmed right here on our street. But then something else hit me. Something that made my stomach drop. The same children in the show were playing on our playground right now. They were wearing the same clothes as they were in the video, and they were performing the exact same actions. Almost as if the video were being filmed live. In the video, one of the children was holding Stub's hand. When I looked out the window, that same child was making a motion like he was holding someone's hand. But there was no one there. I was shocked. I felt sick. I immediately ejected the tape. Much to Emily's sadness, as she was beginning to grow fond of the show. I immediately took the tape and threw it into the garbage. This couldn't be right. Just one of those weird coincidences. I was sure of it. I thought I was done with Stub, but I was wrong. The next day, when my mum picked Emily up from kindergarten, Emily told me that Stub had been following their car, driving a black van. She said she'd looked out the back window and saw Stub behind the wheel of the van. She told me that she had told our mum, but Mum didn't see any cars or vans whatsoever in her rearview mirror. Emily told me she was confused and she looked kind of worried. I told her not to worry and told her to relax and not to worry about it. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. I can't explain why, but I went against my best judgment and decided to fish the tape out of the trash and watch episode 2. The theme song started, but something was wrong. The xylophone was very distorted, and the woman's voice was a lot deeper and kind of messed up as well. The title came up again, but the colors were dull, composed of shades of brown and gray, rather than the usual bright red and yellow. I brushed it off as a messed up, damaged tape and continued watching. Again, another rough cut to a still image of Stub staring at the camera. After a while, I realized it wasn't a still image. It was a video of Stub sitting motionless, staring directly at the viewer. He would periodically turn his head as if cracking his stiff neck, but he would never blink. And he did this the entire episode, which lasted around 20 minutes. But right before the episode ended, Stub closed his eyes tightly, with his head still facing the camera, and then suddenly opened them to reveal pitch black eyes. Nothing but inky blackness within his sockets. And then the tape cut to a picture of a house. My house. I frantically ejected the tape once more and threw it into a drawer. I looked out the window at where the cameraman would have been, but there wasn't anyone. Not a single trace of anyone there. Was I seeing things? Was I going mad? I tried to sleep that night, but I couldn't. I ended up sneaking downstairs in the middle of the night and sitting in the kitchen all night long with the light on and a huge supply of caffeinated drinks. The morning soon came, and I was safe for a while. Rather unexpectedly, the rest of the day went off with no strange occurrences. Emily didn't see Stub following them in his van, which was an enormous relief and a bit of hope for me that this might be over. But that night, I woke up in what can only be described as conscious sleepwalking. I was pulled from my bed by something, an urge. And I can't explain why, but I was drawn to the drawer where I'd put the tape. I subconsciously took the tape out from it and placed it back into the VCR. I sat down on the couch, and then fully awoke from my sleep. I realized where I was and saw that I was about to watch the tape. I wanted to take the tape out and go back upstairs, but that strange urge, that force, told me I needed to watch the final episode. Episode 3. The opening started, and this time, it was totally different. The xylophone had been replaced with a loud banging, and the voice had now become a deep, demonic-sounding voice, singing lyrics in a language I couldn't understand. The title came up, and the title card looked like it had been slashed by the claws of a large animal. When the episode turned on, Stub was sitting at a table with some children. He asked the children if they wanted to play a game, and they all eagerly said yes. Stub reached under the table and revealed a large carving knife. He asked one of the children to place their arms on the table. A small girl did, and Stub asked,
Tell me how it feels.
He then began to slowly slice a thin layer of flesh from the girl's arm, like he was peeling a potato. Blood immediately began to flow, and the room was filled with the sound of the girl's screams. But the other children, they didn't run. They didn't move, they just watched calmly, as if they actually wanted to see the rest. He asked the girl,
Does it feel happy?
Stub continued to slice layer after layer of flesh from the girl's arm until he hit bone. The girl was wailing like a banshee at this point. I was in absolute shock. I felt like I would violently throw up at any moment, but I couldn't stop watching. The girl's arm was drenched in blood, which had spilled onto the table and created a puddle on the tabletop. Stub started laughing in a happy, clown-like way, and the video ended. But then, it cut to another video. It was a video of Emily's room, right now. She was sound asleep. Standing over her bed and looking down at her was Stub. Suddenly, he looked at the camera with inky black eyes in his sockets, and the tape went blank.